At 7:42 a.m. on March 14th, 1944, the New Guinea jungle pressing from all sides, thick with the weight of humidity and the scent of mud, sweat, and spent cordite. Private Sam Walker lay motionless behind a fallen palm, his uniform clinging to his skin, every muscle tense. Around him, his squad was scattered, faces pressed to the earth, pinned down by an enemy they couldn't see, Japanese snipers, hidden somewhere in the tangled green, patient and deadly. Walker's hands trembled, not from fear, but from the echo of every joke and sideways glance he'd endured since landing on the island. In his grip was a Winchester Model 70, a civilian bolt-action rifle he'd ordered from a mail-order catalog back in Ohio. His squad had laughed, calling it a mail-order miracle, a deer gun, a toy for war that demanded firepower and conformity. But now, as the jungle closed in and the enemy's shadow loomed, it was all he had. A single shot cracked through the undergrowth, sharp and final. Walker's breath caught. He steadied his aim, feeling the rough grain of the stock, the cool metal of the scope against his cheek. He knew that the next pull of the trigger could mean life or death, not just for him, but for every man in his unit. The stakes were immediate and deadly, and the outcome uncertain. In that moment, the jungle held its breath, waiting to see if the mail-order gun would finally silence its deadliest ghosts. The story of Sam Walker and his mail-order gun can't be understood without stepping back into the unforgiving world of Pacific theater in 1944. New Guinea was a place where the very air seemed to conspire against survival. The heat was relentless, pressing down on every man like a physical weight. Humidity turned uniforms into rags and boots into swamps. Mosquitoes swarmed in clouds, carrying malaria and dengue fever, while the jungle itself seemed alive, roots and vines tripping the unwary, leeches clinging to exposed skin, and the constant, oppressive buzz of insects filling every moment of silence. For the men of the United States Army and their Australian allies, the enemy was not just the Japanese, but the land itself. Rain fell in sudden, drenching sheets, turning foxholes into muddy graves and rifles into rusted liabilities. Food spoiled quickly, water was always suspect, and sleep was a luxury rarely granted. Yet, for all the misery the jungle inflicted, there was the unseen enemy that haunted every step: the Japanese sniper. By 1944, Japanese snipers had become the terror of Allied patrols. Masters of camouflage and patience, they could disappear into the canopy with nothing but a bolt-action Arisaka-type 97 rifle and a few days' rations. The Arisaka, with its 2.5x scope and long, slender barrel, was a weapon built for patience and precision. In the hands of a Japanese sniper, it became an instrument of terror. They climbed high into the banyan and palm trees, lashing themselves to branches, their rifles cradled in their arms. A single shot could halt an entire advance. Men learned to fear the silence as much as the gunfire, for it was in the quiet moments that death most often came. American doctrine, forged in the open fields of Europe, struggled to adapt. The standard issue M1 Garand was a marvel of engineering, semi-automatic, reliable, and rugged. It fired .30-06 rounds from an 8-shot clip, giving American infantrymen a firepower advantage in most engagements. The Springfield 1903, a bolt-action rifle with a reputation for accuracy, was still issued to some units, especially for designated marksmen. But both weapons, for all their strengths, were designed for a different kind of war. Their iron sights were quick to acquire, but ill-suited for spotting a hidden enemy 200 yards away in the shadows. Their weight and length made them unwieldy in the tangled undergrowth. Against this backdrop, Sam Walker's Winchester Model 70 was an anomaly, a civilian hunting rifle, ordered by mail and fitted with a Lyman Alaskan scope. It was lighter, more precise, and, most importantly, familiar to Walker's hands. The Model 70's smooth bolt action, crisp trigger, and high-quality barrel made a favorite among American sportsmen. But in New Guinea, it was a curiosity at best, a liability at worst. The armorer had questioned its reliability. The sergeant had doubted its stopping power. Walker's squad mates had laughed, calling it a deer gun and betting it would jam at the first sign of trouble. But as the casualty list grew and the sniper threat intensified, the line between regulation and survival began to blur. The men learned to respect any weapon that worked, any tactic that kept them alive. The jungle was an equalizer, stripping away the certainties of training and doctrine, leaving only the raw essentials, skill, nerve, and the will to adapt. In this crucible, Sam Walker's story would unfold, a story not just of marksmanship, but of ingenuity, courage, and the quiet defiance of a man who refused to accept the limits others placed on him. Sam Walker's story didn't begin in the jungle, but in the rolling fields and thick woods of rural Ohio, where the air was crisp and the horizon seemed endless. He was the youngest of four, the quiet one, the one who spent more time listening than talking. His father, a mechanic and a veteran of the Great War, taught Sam to respect machines and the land in equal measure. By the time he was 12, Sam could strip and clean a rifle as easily as he could fix a tractor. He learned patience in the woods, waiting for hours in the cold for a single shot at a white-tailed deer, and he learned precision at the county fair's shooting gallery, where he won his first blue ribbon with a .22 that was older than he was. Sam's fascination with marksmanship grew into something more than a hobby. He devoured every magazine he could find, studied ballistics tables, and saved his money for a rifle that was more than just a tool. It was a promise to himself. The Winchester Model 70 was a pride of American gunmakers, a bolt-action rifle with a smooth, reliable action, a crisp trigger, and a reputation for accuracy that bordered on legendary. Sam ordered this from a catalog, scraping together 2 years' worth of odd jobs and birthday money. When the box finally arrived, he spent hours in the barn, oiling the stock, mounting the Lyman Alaskan scope, and sighting it in at the edge of the cornfield. When war came, Sam enlisted with a sense of duty and a quiet hope that his skills would matter. But the Army was a world of conformity, where every man was issued the same boots, the same helmet, and the same rifle. The M1 Garand was a fine weapon, fast, powerful, and rugged, but it wasn't Sam's Winchester. He brought the Model 70 with him, tucked in a battered case, and from the first day, it set him apart. The armorer raised an eyebrow. The sergeant grumbled about civvies with toys, and the other men in his squad laughed, calling it his mail-order miracle. Sam felt the sting of their words, but he never let it show. While the others played cards or swapped stories, he cleaned his rifle, checked the scope mounts, and ran his fingers over the smooth walnut stock. He took quiet pride in his skill, but the laughter and sideways glances never quite faded. Yet, beneath the surface, Sam's resolve only hardened. He knew what he could do with his rifle, and as the sniper threat grew, so did his determination, not just to prove himself to the squad, but to himself. The jungle would soon test whether that quiet confidence was enough. The jungle was a chessboard, and the Japanese snipers were its most cunning players. For Sam Walker and his squad, every step forward was a gamble, every patch of sunlight a possible death sentence. The enemy was never seen, only felt, a presence in the treetops, a whisper in the undergrowth, a glint of glass that vanished before the mind could register danger. The Americans called them ghosts, and in the humid green labyrinth of New Guinea, the ghosts always seemed to move first. Japanese snipers were not just marksmen. They were artists of patience and discipline. Trained from the earliest days of their military service, they learned to move without sound, to blend into the bark and leaves, to become invisible for hours or even days. Their camouflage was meticulous, uniforms dyed to match the jungle, faces painted in streaks of green and brown, rifles wrapped in burlap and vines. They climbed high into banyan and palm trees, lashing themselves to branches with strips of cloth, their bodies motionless as the world moved below. Their weapon of choice was the Arisaka Type 97 sniper rifle, a bolt-action masterpiece built for precision. Fitted with a 2.5x scope and firing the 6.5 by 50 millimeters cartridge, the Arisaka was lighter and quieter than its American counterparts. Its long, slender barrel and smooth action made it deadly in the hands of patient shooter. The Japanese paired their snipers with spotters, another set of eyes to scan the jungle, to warn a movement, to help choose the perfect moment to strike. Together, they became a force that could paralyze an entire company. The story spread quickly through the American lines. Men shot while filling canteens at a creek, the water turning red before anyone heard the shot. Patrols pinned for hours by a single hidden marksman, unable to move or even raise their heads. A lieutenant killed while reading a map, the bullet passing through the paper and into his heart. The psychological toll was immense. Every rustle in the leaves, every bird that took flight became a warning. The men learned to fear the silence as much as the gunfire, for it was in the quiet moments that death most often came. Walker felt the weight of this fear every day. He watched as his friends grew jumpy, their nerves fraying with each new casualty. The squad's confidence in their firepower, their garrons, their bars, their grenades, meant little against an enemy who could kill from the shadows and disappear before anyone could return fire. The Americans tried to fight back with volume, pouring bullets into trees at the slightest sign of movement, but the jungle swallowed the noise, and the snipers remained unseen. For Walker, the challenge was clear. His Winchester Model 70, with its civilian scope and bolt-action design, was a tool built for patience and precision. But the jungle was not a shooting range, and the enemy was not a paper target. He would have to match the snipers at their own game, waiting, watching, learning to see what others missed. The stakes were nothing less than survival, for himself and for men who now looked to him with a mixture of hope and desperation. The Winchester Model 70 arrived in a battered wooden crate. Its journey from a mail-order catalog in Ohio to the steaming jungles of New Guinea as improbable as the man who carried it. Sam Walker remembered the day it came, months before the first shot was ever fired in anger. He'd saved for years, working odd jobs and skipping luxuries, dreaming of a rifle that was more than just a tool. To him, the Model 70 was a promise, a weapon built for precision, for patience, for the kind of shooting that demanded respect for every detail. The rifle itself was a marvel of American engineering. Its bolt-action mechanism was smooth as silk, the three-position safety crisp and reliable. The barrel, cold-forged and free-floated, was renowned for its accuracy. Walker had chosen a .30-06 chambering, the same round used by the Army's own Springfield 1903, but with civilian twist, a Lyman Alaskan scope, 2.5x magnification, mounted low and tight to the receiver. The walnut stock was oiled to a deep sheen, the checkering sharp beneath his fingers. Every part of the rifle felt right, balanced, solid, and familiar. But in the eyes of the Army, Walker's pride and joy was an oddity. The standard issue M1 Garand was the king of the American arsenal. Semi-automatic, 8 rounds in a clip, fast to reload and rugged enough to survive the mud and rain. The Garand was a soldier's rifle, built for the chaos of battle, for laying down fire in a desperate charge or holding a line against a banzai attack. The Model 70, by contrast, was a hunter's rifle, a bolt-action, 5-shot magazine, slower to cycle and, in the eyes of many, a liability in a firefight. The armorer had been the first to scoff. "You planning to hunt deer out here, Walker?" he'd asked, turning the rifle over in his hands, searching for flaws. The sergeant was less amused. "You wish you had a Garand when the shooting starts," he warned, his voice low and certain. The other men in the squad made jokes, some good-natured, some not. Mail order miracle, they called it, Walker's magic stick. At night, as Walker cleaned the rifle by lantern light, he could feel their eyes on him, curious, skeptical, sometimes even resentful. Yet Walker's care for his rifle bordered on ritual. He cleaned it every night, stripping it down and oiling every part, checking the scope mounts, running a patch through the barrel until it gleamed. He wondered if he was in over his head, if the rifle he'd trusted was just another liability in a war that punished every weakness. But the next morning, he tried again. The squad was pinned by a sniper for hours, unable to move, the sun beating down as sweat pooled in their boots. Walker watched the treetops, learning to ignore the obvious, to look for the subtle, the way a branch bent under weight, the faint shimmer of heat off glass, the unnatural stillness of a birdless limb. He adjusted his tactics, moving slowly, changing positions, never firing twice in the same spot. His second shot was closer. He saw a flash of movement, a hand shifting on a rifle, and fired. The bullet struck bark inches from its mark, sending a shower of splinters into the air. The sniper vanished, but for the first time, Walker felt a flicker of hope. He was learning, adapting, turning failure into knowledge. The casualties continued to mount. Each loss weighed on Walker, deepening his resolve even as it chipped away at his confidence. The squad skepticism grew, their patience thinning with every missed opportunity. Walker felt the pressure building, the unspoken expectation that he would be the one to break the deadlock. He spent hours glassing the treetops, memorizing every branch and shadow, replaying every mistake in his mind. But with each failure, he grew sharper. He learned to trust his instincts, to wait for the perfect moment, to let the jungle teach him its secrets. The fear of being hunted never left him, but became a tool, a reminder that survival depended on patience, precision, and the willingness to try again. As the days bled together and the sniper threat grew ever more deadly, Walker's quiet determination became the squad's last hope. The jungle was still a maze of danger, but now, somewhere in its depths, a marksman was learning how to fight back. And soon, the enemy would learn that the mail-order gun was more than just a punchline. It was the beginning of a legend. The jungle was holding its breath. For days, Walker's squad had been pinned by a sniper whose presence was felt in every cautious step, every whispered order, every man who hesitated before exposing himself to the sun-dappled clearing. The fear was a living thing, coiling through the ranks, tightening its grip with every casualty. Walker felt it too, but beneath the anxiety, something else was growing, a stubborn resolve, a sense that the next shot might finally tip the balance. It was the fourth morning, and the air was thick with mist and the promise of rain. The squad was huddled in a shallow depression, the mud cool against their skin, the world reduced to a patchwork of green and brown. Walker lay prone, his Winchester Model 70 nestled into his shoulder, the Lyman Alaskan scope fogged the edges from his breath. He wiped it clean with a trembling thumb, then pressed his cheek to the stock, letting the familiar weight ground him. He scanned the treetops, moving slowly, methodically, refusing to let frustration cloud his vision. The lessons of the past days echoed in his mind. Don't chase movement. Wait for the pattern to break. Trust your instincts. He watched a pair of birds flit from branch to branch, their wings a blur of color. He watched a squirrel dart along a limb, pausing to sniff the air. He watched the wind stir the leaves, creating 1,000 false alarms. Then, in the far corner of the canopy, something shifted. It was almost nothing, a branch that moved against the wind, a patch of shadow that seemed too dense, too deliberate. Walker's heart skipped. He slowed his breathing, letting the world narrow to the circle of glass before his eye. He adjusted the scope, dialing in the focus, measuring the distance 200 yards, maybe a little more. He felt the weight of the rifle, the cool metal against his palm, the steady thrum of his pulse in his ears. He remembered his father's words. Patience is a marksman's best friend. Wait for the shot that matters. Walker waited. The jungle was silent, the squad behind him barely daring to breathe. He watched the shadow, willing it to move, to reveal itself. Minutes passed. Sweat trickled down his spine, pooling at the small of his back. His arms ached, but he held steady. Then a glint, a flash of sunlight on glass, the unmistakable curve of the scope. The sniper was there, hidden in the crook of 2 branches, his Arisaka rifle cradled in his arms, his face a mass of concentration. Walker felt a surge of adrenaline, a clarity that cut through the fear. He calculated the wind, the drop, the angle. He exhaled, letting the tension flow from his body, and squeezed the trigger. The Winchester barked, the recoil a familiar jolt. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the sniper slumped forward, tumbling from his perch, crashing through the branches to the jungle floor below. The squad stared in disbelief. The silence was broken only by the distant call of a bird, the rustle of leaves settling back into place. Walker's hands shook as he worked the bolt, chambering another round. He felt a rush of relief, pride, and something deeper, a sense that he had finally proven himself, not just to the squad, but to himself. The men behind him erupted in quiet cheers, their fear momentarily forgotten. The sergeant clapped him on the shoulder, his eyes wide with respect. "Hell of a shot, Walker," he whispered. "Hell of a shot." The mood in the squad shifted. Where there had been skepticism, there was now hope. Where there had been isolation, there was now camaraderie. Walker was no longer the outsider with a mail-order gun. He was the man who had broken the deadlock, the marksman who had turned the tide. The Winchester, once a punchline, was now a symbol of survival. But Walker knew the battle was far from over. The jungle was still full of shadows, the enemy still watching, still waiting. He cleaned his rifle that night with a new sense of purpose, his hand steady, his mind clear. He replayed the shot in his mind, not as a fluke, but as a first step in a new kind of fight, a fight where patience, skill, and quiet determination could change the course of a battle. As the sun set and the jungle came alive with the sounds of night, Walker lay awake, listening to the steady breathing of his squad. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, but this time it was a burden he was ready to carry. The turning point had come, and with it, a new sense of hope. The legend of the mail-order gun was just beginning, and the days ahead would test Walker in ways he could never have. Imagine, the jungle never slept. For 4 days, Sam Walker lived in a world where every sound was a warning, every shadow a threat, and every breath a gamble. The sniper duel that began with a single, fateful shot became a relentless test of nerve, skill, and endurance, a battle not just of bullets, but of wits and willpower. The morning after Walker's first kill, the mood in the squad was different. The men who had once mocked his mail-order gun now watched him with a mixture of hope and awe. The sergeant, who had doubted, now deferred to Walker's judgment, asking, "What do you see, Sam?" before every move. But the enemy was learning, too. The Japanese snipers, sensing a new threat, changed their tactics. They shifted positions more often, used decoys, helmets on sticks, flashes of glass in the wrong places, and worked in pairs, one drawing fire while the other waited for a mistake. Walker adapted. He learned to read the jungle like a book, to spot the subtle clues that betrayed a sniper's nest. A branch bent under unnatural weight, a patch of leaves that didn't quite match, the faintest shimmer of heat off a scope. He used the sun to his advantage, moving with the light at his back, forcing the enemy to look into the glare. He watched the wind, noting how it carried the sound of a bolt cycling or the scent of gun oil. Every detail mattered. Ammunition became a constant worry. The Winchester Model 70 was accurate, but every shot had to count. Walker rationed his rounds, firing only when he was certain. He cleaned the rifle obsessively, stripping it down each night, oiling the bolt, checking the scope mounts. The jungle was unforgiving. Moisture seeped into everything. Rust threatened every moving part, and a single malfunction could mean death. Walker's hands grew raw from the work, but he never complained. The first day of the duel, Walker spotted a sniper high in a palm, the Arisaka's barrel just visible through a tangle of vines. He waited, heart pounding, as the enemy shifted for a better angle. Walker calculated the distance, 180 yards, adjusted for wind, and squeezed the trigger. The shot was true. The sniper tumbled from his perch, crashing through the branches. The squad cheered, but Walker felt only relief, and the knowledge that there were more out there. That night, the enemy retaliated. A sniper's bullet struck the squad's medic as he crawled to help a wounded man. The loss hit hard. Walker lay awake, staring at the canopy, replaying every shot in his mind. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He was no longer just fighting for himself. He was a squad shield, their last hope against an enemy who seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. The second day dawned with a heavy mist. Walker moved with the squad, glassing the treetops, searching for the telltale signs. He spotted a flash of movement, a hand shifting on a rifle, a face half hidden by leaves. He waited, letting the sniper settle, then fired. The enemy slumped forward, lifeless. The squad moved quickly, retrieving the Arisaka and confirming the kill. Walker's legend grew with each shot, but so did the pressure. The Japanese snipers were relentless, and every victory was paid for in sweat and fear. By the third day, Walker's nerves were frayed. The enemy had begun to use bait, wounded men left in the open, hoping to draw fire. Walker resisted the urge to shoot, knowing it was a trap. He counseled patience, urging the squad to wait, to watch, to trust him. The men listened, their faith in Walker now absolute. The sergeant called him the Ghost Hunter, a title that spread to the company like wildfire. That afternoon, Walker faced his greatest test. The squad was pinned by two snipers working in tandem, their fire coordinated, their positions nearly impossible to spot. Walker crawled through the mud, moving inch by inch, using the jungle's chaos as cover. He found a vantage point, steadied his breathing, and waited. Minutes stretched into an hour. Sweat dripped into his eyes, his muscles cramped, but he held his position. Finally, he saw it, a glint of metal. The briefest flash of movement. He fired, the Winchester's report echoing through the trees. One sniper fell. The second, startled, shifted for a better shot. Walker worked the bolt, chambered another round, and fired again. The jungle fell silent. The squad moved, breaking the ambush, their cheers muffled by exhaustion and relief. The fourth day was the hardest. Walker was down to his last handful of rounds. The enemy, sensing his fatigue, pressed harder. The squad moved constantly, never staying in one place for long. Walker's eyes burned from lack of sleep. His hands shook from adrenaline and fear. But he refused to give in. He watched, he waited, he learned. That morning, he spotted a sniper in a banyan, the Arasaka's muzzle just visible through a curtain of leaves. Walker adjusted for distance, for wind, for the angle of the sun. He fired. The sniper fell. The squad moved again, their confidence growing with each victory. By the end of the fourth day, Walker had accounted for 11 enemy snipers. The squad, once skeptical, now treated him with reverence. The mail order gun was no longer a joke. It was a lifeline, a symbol of hope in a world gone mad. Walker felt the cost of each kill, the faces of the men he'd lost, the weight of the lives he'd saved. The jungle was still dangerous, the enemy still out there, but for the first time, the squad believed they might survive. Walker's legend grew with each passing hour. The men told stories around the fire, recounting his shots, his patience, his uncanny ability to see what others missed. The sergeant wrote a letter home, calling Walker the best damn shot in the Pacific. The company commander visited the squad, shaking Walker's hand, promising recognition when the battle was done. But Walker knew the fight was far from over. The jungle was a living thing, always shifting, always hungry. The enemy would adapt, would find new ways to strike. Walker cleaned his rifle that night, his hands steady, his mind clear. He was ready for whatever came next. The 4-day duel had changed everything. Walker was no longer an outsider. He was a hero, a legend, a man who had turned the tide with patience, skill, and a rifle no one believed in. The jungle was still full of shadows, but now, somewhere in its depths, the enemy knew they were being hunted, too. And for the first time, hope flickered in the hearts of men who had almost forgotten what it felt like to believe. At 6:03 a.m. on March 18th, 1944, the jungle was a cathedral of silence, broken only by the distant drip of rain from a canopy. For days of relentless tension had left Walker's squad exhausted, their nerves frayed to the breaking point. The air was thick with the promise of another storm, the sky a bruised gray above the tangled green. Every man in the squad knew something was coming. The Japanese had lost too many snipers, too many of their best, to let the American with the mail-order gun continue unchecked. Walker felt it too, a prickling at the back of his neck, a sense that the enemy was watching, waiting, planning. He moved with deliberate caution, his Winchester Model 70 cradled in his arms, the Lyman Alaskan scope already fogged with the morning's humidity. He wiped it clean, heart pounding, every sense straining for the smallest clue. The squad was pinned in a shallow depression, the ground slick with mud, the air heavy with the scent of rain and cordite. The sergeant whispered, "They're up to something, Sam. I can feel it." Walker nodded, eyes never leaving the treetops. The Japanese had set a trap. Walker could see it in the way the jungle felt wrong, too quiet, too still. The enemy had learned from their losses, adapting their tactics, using decoys and false trails. They left a helmet perched on a branch, a rifle propped against a log, a glint of glass in the wrong place. Walker ignored them all, trusting his instincts, waiting for the real threat to reveal itself. The rain began as a whisper, then a steady drumbeat on the leaves. Visibility dropped, the world reduced to a blur of green and gray. The squad huddled together, their rifles slick with water, their eyes wide with fear. Walker lay prone, his cheek pressed to the stock, the cold seeping into his bones. He slowed his breathing, letting the rhythm of the rain calm his nerves. He remembered his father's words, "A marksman's greatest weapon is patience. Wait for the shot that matters." Minutes stretched into an hour. The Japanese snipers were patient, too. They waited for the Americans to make a mistake, to break cover, to give in to fear. Walker watched the treetops, searching for the pattern to break, for the shadow that didn't belong. He saw a branch bend under weight, a patch of leaf that shivered against the wind. He waited, muscles aching, eyes burning from the strain. Then, a flicker, a glint of metal, the briefest flash of movement. Walker's heart leapt. He adjusted the scope, dialing in the focus, measuring the distance. 220 yards, uphill, through a curtain of rain. He calculated the wind, the drop, the angle. The sniper was good, hidden in the crook of a banyan, his Arisaka rifle almost invisible, his face a mask of concentration. Walker felt a surge of adrenaline, a clarity that cut through the exhaustion. He exhaled, letting the tension flow from his body, and squeezed the trigger. The Winchester barked, the recoil a familiar jolt. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Japanese sniper slumped forward, tumbling from his perch, crashing through the branches to the jungle floor below. The squad stared in disbelief, the silence broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. The emotional release was immediate, relief, pride, and a deep sense of loss for the fallen. The squad moved cautiously, retrieving the enemy rifles, confirming the kills. Walker cleaned his Winchester in the shelter of a fallen log, his hand steady, his mind replaying every shot, every decision. He knew the battle was not over. The jungle was still full of shadows, the enemy still watching, still waiting. But for the first time, the squad could breathe, could hope, could believe that survival was possible. As night fell, Walker sat with his squad around a small, smokeless fire. The men spoke in hushed tones, their voices reverent, their eyes shining with gratitude. The mail order gun was passed from hand to hand, its legend already growing. Walker felt the burden of leadership, the responsibility of being the one who made the difference. He looked at the faces of his friends, at the empty spaces where others had once sat, and felt a deep, aching sorrow. But he also felt pride, a quiet, unspoken pride in having faced the darkness and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least unbroken. The final confrontation had been a masterclass in patience, skill, and courage. Walker had turned the tables, ending the threat that had haunted his squad for days. The jungle was still dangerous, the war far from over. But for one night, hope flickered in the hearts of men who had almost forgotten what it felt like to believe. When the last echoes of gunfire faded and the jungle finally fell silent, the transformation within Walker's squad was unmistakable. The men who had once rolled their eyes at his mail-order gun now looked at him with new respect, their skepticism replaced by gratitude and awe. The battered Winchester Model 70, blackened by smoke and streaked with mud, was no longer a curiosity or a punchline. It was a symbol of survival, a testament to what could be achieved when necessity met ingenuity. For the first time in nearly a week, the squad was able to move out of their shallow depression and link up with a supply column. The relief on their faces was unmistakable. Fresh water, hot food, and the simple comfort of knowing the next step wouldn't be their last brought a quiet joy that words could barely express. Walker felt it too, though his joy was tempered by exhaustion and the weight of memory. He carried the Winchester slung across his back, the once mocked mail-order gun now treated with a reverence usually reserved for holy relics. The change in how the men treated Walker was immediate and profound. Where there had once been jokes and sideways glances, there was now respect, sometimes spoken, more often shown in the way they watched his back, the way they listened when he spoke. The sergeant, who had once doubted, now made a point of consulting Walker before every patrol. Even the armorer, who had scoffed at the civilian rifle, asked to see it, turning it over in his hands with newfound appreciation for its craftsmanship and the man who had wielded it so well. Word of Walker's action spread quickly through the regiment. Officers came to shake his hand, to ask about his tactics, to hear the story firsthand. The Winchester itself became a symbol of ingenuity, of courage, of the quiet defiance that sometimes makes all the difference in war. Men from other units came to see it, to ask Walker about his shots, his patience, his ability to see what others missed. But recognition came with a cost. Walker could not forget the faces of the men he'd lost, the friends who would never go home. The burden of survival weighed heavily on him, a constant reminder that every victory in war is paid for in blood. He spent long hours alone, cleaning his rifle, replaying every shot in his mind, wondering if he could have done more, if he could have saved just one more life. The gratitude of his comrades was real, but so was the ache of loss. In the quiet moments, Walker reflected on what it meant to be a hero. He had never sought glory, never wanted to stand apart. He had simply done what he knew best, trusted his skill, his patience, and a rifle that felt like an extension of his own hands. The jungle had tested him in ways he could never have imagined, and though he had emerged victorious, he knew the scars would remain long after the war was over. As we close the chapter on Sam Walker's remarkable stand, take a moment to reflect on the quiet courage and ingenuity that shaped this story and so many others like it. If you or someone in your family has a story of service, innovation, or survival from World War II or any chapter of military history, we invite you to share in the comments below. Your memories and insights help keep these legacies alive, connecting generations and honoring those who stood their ground when it mattered most. If this story moved you, please like the video and subscribe to our channel for more true accounts of forgotten heroes, battlefield innovation, and the untold moments that changed history. Every like, comment, and share helps us reach more people and preserve these stories for future generations. Don't let these lessons fade into silence. Be part of a community that values courage, ingenuity, and remembrance. And if you think you've heard it all, stay tuned. Our next episode uncovers another hidden chapter of World War II, a story so unexpected. It will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the war. Don't miss it.